Okay, so here we go. So the original is on the left, everyone. The new version is on the right. I mean, besides the headwear, there's obviously been incredible improvements in the motion. So how long ago was this one on the right, Andrew?
Would have been over a year and a half. That was June of 2020. Yeah, it was COVID year. Yeah,
the original one on the left is the COVID year, and the new one's on the right. Okay, so this is what it looked like, everyone. So let's watch him make a couple of little practice swings here. All right, so let's just slow that down a little bit. I mean, we can obviously see straight away there's like a completely different setup angle, but why don't we talk about what you saw here straight away, Alex, from the very get-go with this setup angle?
Yeah, you can see the setup right away, just where that torso sat initially, being so much more off the ball, away from the target, and just how he was going to be able to rotate into that backswing. Those movements, when we compare them, he had himself into a spot beforehand where he was just so far behind the ball that he was going to really struggle to be able to get on top of it and cover the golf ball like elite players do.
100%. And particularly bad for irons, would you say?
100%. Absolutely.
All right. So when this rotates, and what I might even do is actually make a direct comparison to the one on the right-hand side. So this obviously starts directly on top of the ball, doesn't have anywhere near as much of the lateral motion with the top half. And when you get to the top here, I mean, couldn't be any more different there in terms of the direction it's turned and then where the center of mass is.
Yeah, we've really worked a lot at being able to get his upper center a lot more on top of his lower center, just to reduce how far that head shifts behind it and get his rib cage to turn correctly instead of having, again, everything just way too far behind the golf ball.
Would you say that like it looks more down with the left side as well on the right-hand side as well? So covers the ball a lot better with his sternum and torso?
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. All right. And then in transition, so what does this one just needs so much more acrossness, doesn't it, to get back over to where it needed to be to actually make contact with the ball? And this one, obviously, the transition is much smaller in terms of getting across. But to me, it looks like it's got a lot more torque. Would that be right? Like it's got a lot more stored energy in it, Alex?
For sure. Well, anytime somebody's that far behind it, as a good player, if he's as behind it as he was, he's going to figure out how to slide into it, how to shift a lot further just to be able to avoid fatting the shot. Now, when he's a lot more on top of the golf ball as he is now, it's a lot easier for him to just go down into the ground, turn the corner, and he's going to control his release pattern a lot better.
And talk to me about one of the things that's been incredible, like obviously with that lack of compensation or the matchup in it to get back across, more over the ball, there's obviously created consistency, a better low point and all those things. But Andrew, you've gained like, how much club head speed have you gained with driver?
It's been crazy. We've gained 15 miles an hour. 15 miles an hour, both to the average and to the max, which is a little bit nuts, honestly, when you look back at it. Yeah.
It's insane. And how you've done that obviously through the sequencing of the body, but you've also incorporated a little bit of super speed stuff into that as well.
We did. Yeah, we added super speed. I was certainly curious about it. And I think Alex had kind of given the green light once we got to a point where, the footwork, the stability, the fundamentals allowed it. But it was nice. It came at a good point because Alex and I were working a lot on ground forces and using the legs better. And it was perfect because it gave me a place to be athletic and to feel that and really get into the legs.
And yeah, right. So talk about that a little bit, Alex, like the actual ground force reaction stuff and how he's using the ground now as opposed to previously.
Yeah. So once, as Andrew said, once he got to a point where the movement was going to be like conducive for good enough consistency in ball flight, there's an opportunity. I think that he was at 110, 112 mile per hour with driver club head speed. So it was like, okay, we're hitting fairways. Let's rev things up. Let's find another gear. And what Andrew lacked at that point was delivering enough of that vertical force into the ground. So, a movement, a power move, if it will, that we see amongst guys, especially guys that, like a Rory, that's not a 6'4" player, somebody that's not super tall in stature being able to create a little bit more energy, getting into the legs and then driving back into the ground to create a lot more speed. And Andrew put the time in. I mean, I cannot say enough about the work that he put in to what I had provided for him in terms of understanding and movement training. And in terms of somebody following the super speed protocol, I don't think anybody has ever followed it to a T and documented it to the level that Andrew has. And knowing that he's picked up those, 15 miles per hour, it's just proof that if you put that work in, you'll get that reward.
It's unbelievable. And I think that that's the thing, is that you just can't underestimate. And it's what I love, not to harp on about Skillest, right? But it's so much more about process. Like, we obviously absolutely hate videos that say, hey, just do this one quick tip, because you and I, Alex, have been teaching far too long to know that that is just never the case, has never happened, won't ever happen. And the more we can change people's consciousness to, and awareness to, like, just give yourself some time, put processes in place. That's when you'll get better. I mean, it doesn't actually even take that long. Like, if you look back at in a year's time from here, and you've just put a bit of energy into it, you're like, wow, that only took a year and I've dropped 10 shots, or I've added 15 miles an hour. But people often don't even take that, that short period of time to put process into it. But mate, let's have a quick chat about this. So this is obviously where the block was coming from, not only the big high right, not only the too far back with his top half from the front angle, but I mean, how different is that, right? So this is obviously like the one on the right. I've done the old switcheroo here, unfortunately. You would think I'd know how to use Skillest from the last few years. But so the original's on the right now, the old one's on the original's on the right, the new one's on the left. And you can see how open the face is here on the right-hand side, how much more separation, how much more laid off it is, how much more separation there is between the elbows, this sort of thing. And then obviously coming in, how much more behind him it comes in, right? So I look, not that I'm trying to put words into your mouth here, Alex, but I would imagine that a motion like this, where the club actually comes in more in front of him with a more neutral face and less open, this is how you've stopped the block.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure that Andrew's heard me speak of arm structure enough times for a few lifetimes. So understanding how to get the arms into a structured position that could actually support more of a neutral club face, and really letting the arms be that structural role, and then let the lower body be a lot more of that power producing role. So he drastically changed it. He has coined a new combination training aid, the McDonald straight jacket, which consists of the Tour Striker Smart Ball combined with a golf towel under the armpits. And he hit so many golf balls with that combination training aid that I was getting messages on Instagram asking me if he ever hits balls without it.
And that's so interesting. So what would you say? Because some people, Andrew, would be like, look at that lunatic down the end of the driving range,
Not some people would. A lot of people did.
Yeah. So what do you say to people who say training aids don't work, or, you don't need to do that stuff? Like, how important has that been for your development?
I mean, it's individual, but for me, it goes back to what you said. The biggest thing I've learned from Alex is the learning process. And it doesn't happen. Like you just said, it's not one day, it's not two, it's a continuum. It's a really long thing. And, what you can execute on one day may be a percentage of where you want to be in a couple of weeks. And for me, the only way to get there was, in some of these cases, was to get the towel underneath the armpits, to use the smart ball, to actually feel something. Because as awkward as the top of backswing position had gotten to, that was normal, right? That was what I did, and I felt good there. And trying to get into this other position felt like I was, doing some kind of yoga position, and it was absurd. And you can do slow swings, you can do these things, but the training aid was huge for me. Gosh, I mean, Alex, you're right. We did it for 4 months probably.
Yep.
And it kept getting better, but and it got to the point where we eventually had to just say, okay, it's time, take them off. Let's try and look what stuck, right? It's there. It just takes, it's really like you said, it's a super speed. It takes the time, right? It's not going to be one day. It's not going to be 1 week. Your body will learn, but you need something to help it.
It is time, and it's it's a willingness to step out of your comfort zone as well, isn't it, Andrew? Like the number of times, like I've been told in 20 years of coaching, but that doesn't feel natural, right? Like you hear that all the time. And I'm like, well, guess what? Natural's like playing off 22 at the moment. So let's maybe do something a little unnatural.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that, isn't it? It's like putting the time into a process, a willingness to feel like you can actually feel terrible and play great. Like I've done that before. Like I've been out there going, I'm going to miss it. Like this feels so bad. And I'm like, wow, the ball flight's pretty good though, right? So yeah, these are the things that are very difficult for the average golfer, you know, who wants to get better to understand or embrace. But yeah, hopefully with amazing examples like you, mate, we can hopefully buck that trend and push people to a better way to learn, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, there's no question. Like it goes back to what you said, whether it's the McDonald straitjacket with those training aids or, you know, or some other like rehearsal thing. When I'm working on these things, you know, we'll talk about something. Alex will talk about either getting into my legs more or feeling something. And exaggeration is huge, even with no training aids. So even if I don't have those on, you know, if you're watching me in one of these sessions when I'm trying to make progress, you know, you'll see me lower my body by a foot, 2 feet in like a kind of a practice swing drill. And then when I go do that exact same feeling in the real swing, my lower body might drop by an inch. And Alex was the first one to kind of tell me that. And I know we always say you have to exaggerate, but I don't think you really realize just how much you have to exaggerate until you do it without a ball. And then you film yourself doing it with a ball and you realize just how different, you know, your brain does. Once you see a golf ball, everything changes.
Which is why it's so important to film yourself, isn't it? Because what feels, you know, to change something on camera this much, it's got to feel like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got to feel like so radically different.